ILTV Security Brief. I'm Kalev Ben David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. The Israeli government is weighing plans for how to move forward in Gaza amid a stalemate in talks for a hostage deal. Prime Minister Netanyahu is considering a full military takeover of Gaza to pressure Hamas, while IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir is advocating a more limited offensive against the terror group's remaining strongholds in the Strip. Images released by Hamas showing hostages Ram Breslavsky and Avital David being starved to near death in captivity spurred public outrage and protests in Israel, demanding the government make a deal for their release. Israeli officials accusing international media and foreign governments and organizations such as the UN of downplaying the suffering of the hostages while focusing on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Germany, Canada, and Belgium join Egypt, Jordan, and the UAE in the effort to boost the food supplies into Gaza via airdrops, with over 800 aid packages delivered from planes since the start of the operation. Some 300 trucks a day are now bringing food and fuel into Gaza as the IDF expands its efforts to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian aid for the civilian population there. Israeli Air Force aircraft carry out a strike in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, eliminating Hussam Hassam Harab, a Hezbollah operative who operated from Lebanese territory, directing terrorist cells in Syria, planning to launch rockets towards the Golan Heights. Another big story. After nearly 2 years of fighting, the Israeli government is set to take a new strategy in Gaza, ordering the IDF to take full control of every inch of the Gaza Strip in hopes this will pressure Hamas to release the remaining hostages and wipe out its remaining military capacity. But it's a move with considerable risks. The risk of greater casualties among the troops, the risks to the hostages as the fighting moves closer to where they're being held, the risk of worsening the humanitarian situation for the civilian population, and the risk of greater international condemnation, and also the risk to U.S. support of the war. Here's Prime Minister Netanyahu and U.S. President Trump addressing the new plans for Gaza.
ההישגים האלה כמובן הם מאחורינו, אבל עדיין יש צורך להשלים את תבוסת האויב בעזה, לשחרר את כל חטופינו, להבטיח שעזה לא תהווה יותר איום על ישראל. אנחנו לא מוותרים על אף אחת מהמשימות הללו, ואנחנו נעשה את זה יחד באמצעות ההקרבה הגדולה של הלוחמים שלנו והלוחמות שלנו.
Would you support Israel reoccupying all of Gaza has been suggested by some Israeli officials?
Well, I don't know what the suggestion is. I know that we are there now trying to get people fed. As you know, $60 million was given by the United States fairly recently to supply food, and a lot of food, frankly, for the people of Gaza that are obviously not doing too well with the food. And I know Israel's going to help us with that in terms of distribution and also money. We also have the Arab states are going to help us with that in terms of the money and possibly distribution. So that's what I'm focused on. As far as the rest of it, I really can't say. That's going to be pretty much up to Israel.
And for more, we are joined by the former IDF spokesperson, Reserve Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovich. She's now director of the American Jewish Committee in Israel. Avital, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
As President Trump says, it's up to Israel. Israel has to make some decisions going forward in Gaza. What are the options? Some who say we need a complete IDF takeover of Gaza. Others say perhaps it should only be gradual stages. Others demanding some kind of hostage deal now.
So let's examine for a minute and look back. There were 251 hostages that were taken by Hamas and a few other terror groups in Gaza. 201 of them have been released, returned, mostly by agreement, but also a few by an operational kind of action. Does Hamas even have an incentive to release those 50 hostages? I'm not sure that is the case. As a matter of fact, what I'm hearing are Hamas officials repeating time and time again that they will not lay down their weapons. Now, what choices did Israel have? On the one hand, it could choose to hold back, continue and operating surgically. But at the same time, this will mean that the hostages most likely will die of hunger, starvation, diseases, you name it. The other option Israel has, by the way, all are bad options,
right,
The other option is to conduct some sort of a military action. And that military action is due to take place in the 25% area of Gaza that the IDF has still not operated in. Now, what kind of military operation? Whether it will be only from the air or combined air and ground or combined air, ground and navy, it's premature. The government still need to make that decision. But here Israel has a choice between a bad choice and a worse choice. But something in order to maybe save lives of a few hostages must be done.
Right. Now, what are the risks for Israel potentially? We've heard about potential casualties, risks to the hostages, and also the international community, including perhaps even potentially the U.S.
First of all, in August, we were all witnessing a horrible scenario in which Hamas militants actually were ordered to murder the hostages if they hear IDF soldiers in the area, and we lost lives of 6 hostages. So this could be repeating again. And this is one immediate, I would say, danger or precaution if Israel would go to some military boots on the ground incursion into those 25%. From the U.S. perspective, I think the focus would be on the humanitarian aspect. That's where the U.S. would focus. But the U.S. has also other issues to focus on. For example, the war in Ukraine. We know that Witkoff is speaking with the Russian leadership this week. So they have their own priorities, obviously. There is another question here that at the same time that all of this is taking place, Israelis are attacked all over the world, Israeli tourists. Embassies, Israeli staff in embassies needs to go almost underground. So there are a lot of implications to the situation on the ground here.
All right. Well, let's go into the details about some of those situations that you've raised. Let's start with the humanitarian issue, because I think that is a key factor in Gaza going forward. Our Emily Schrader actually was down this week in one of the distribution centers there in Gaza. She filed this report. Let's take a look.
Well, hello from the Gaza Strip. I am now at the Humanitarian Aid Distribution Center for the United Nations. Now, this site has been the center of controversy in recent days because of the failure of the United Nations to distribute the thousands of pallets of aid that are sitting here and have been sitting here for many weeks. Now, we spoke with a senior IDF officer just a few moments ago who confirmed that over 5,000 trucks have been approved and moved into the Gaza Strip waiting to be distributed. Just looking around this area, we've seen that there is medicine, aid being shipped from the United Arab Emirates. We've seen aid specifically designated for the United Nations, hundreds of pallets of flour, baby food, and other critical supplies that the people of Gaza are not receiving as a result of the UN failing to do their job. The IDF also confirmed that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is a separate distribution center nearby, has distributed over 95 million meals since aid was reinstated on May 19th. The UN, however, has confirmed, according to their data, that approximately 87% of the convoys of the aid trucks that are picked up by the United Nations have been looted, either by Gazans on the ground or by Hamas on the ground inside Gaza. One of the things that was specifically mentioned earlier is that there are now 4 different humanitarian aid crossings that are operational. There are hundreds of trucks coming in every single week, providing critical supplies to the people of Gaza. In addition to that, the IDF has taken more steps in recent days to provide more humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza, including airdrops of aid provided by Jordan and the UAE, as well as ensuring humanitarian corridors, pauses in fighting in order to better distribute that humanitarian aid, and additional measures.
Avital, since this effort to create an aid system that isn't compromised by Hamas was started, it's been under attack, under physical attack from Hamas, and under sort of this campaign against it internationally. Are the U.S., Israel and the U.S. together in this? Are they on the right track with what they are trying to do? Is there more they could or should be doing going forward?
I'm not surprised by the very full of lies Hamas campaign on the humanitarian aid. Israel is not using starvation as a tactic. I want to explain to our viewers that Israel doesn't even have any incentive to do that. First of all, the humanitarian values, the Jewish values, that's one thing. But we are right there next to Gaza. The last thing Israel needs is some sort of diseases flowing through the Mediterranean Sea right into the cities, the Israeli cities. So there is no interest in that whatsoever. It's not going to happen. So where are we with this humanitarian situation? Your reporter was right. A huge percentage of the trucks are being looted, either by Hamas, and we see them all the time, climbing the trucks with guns, escorting the trucks, or by local people. In order to solve that issue, more distribution centers are needed to be opened. And that's the plan. That's the American plan together with the Israeli plan. So when we see that, and Gaza will be flooded with all these distribution centers, I assume that the starvation campaign led by Hamas will slowly diminish. There is no starvation in Gaza. There is some places which there is hunger. This is correct because the trucks cannot make it all the way there, but this is not an Israeli strategy at all.
Right. I'll correct you somewhat. There is a starvation campaign in Gaza, but it seems to be directed against some of the Israeli hostages there. Right. And we have seen those shocking photographs of Ram and Avital. God knows what the situation of the hostages. I want you to address that because this is something that should be perhaps getting greater exposure, greater focus on, without not ignoring other situations in Gaza, but this in particular. There should be more of an international recognition of it.
I think that a lot of the international media outlets lost their professional ethics. And I cannot understand why this very strong, horrific image of Avital David and Rom hardly standing on their feet did not open front pages, was not the headers of front pages all over the world. And staged pictures by a Turkish photographer were. And false facts given by the health ministry run by Hamas are published as facts. Something was lost here in terms of the proportions and the accountability of the information. And I want to tell you that yesterday, because of that exactly, AJC has published...
Right, the organization you represent here in Israel.
Has published a one-page ad showing Avital David minus 41% of his original weight and asked people to scan a barcode and approach their legislative officials and press and ask for the return of the hostage, just to highlight. So we are actually replacing what the media should have done on its own.
Right. Now, let me ask you then, you were for many years professionally involved with public diplomacy for Israel, still in some ways, but you were with the Army Spokesperson's unit in several roles, setting up its social media, working in front of the international press. Is there more Israel, its governmental apparatus dealing with those issues? And yes, the IDF spokesperson perhaps could be doing in this regard?
I think that the IDF spokesperson is a wonderful unit, but the responsibility doesn't lie there. Because, you know, Kalev, when a leader of a country sees a picture, which could be fake, of supposedly someone starving in Gaza, then that leader could take a policy because of the emotions he felt at the minute he saw that picture or that 12-second clip. So it has to be treated in a more governmental approach.
Right, and it reports that President Trump, that it had that impact on President Trump.
Of course, and other leaders in the world as well. Therefore, the government should establish a mechanism which existed in the past, and that mechanism would be a proactive one, because we cannot continue and react to campaigns and falsehoods led by Hamas. Israel needs to take the lead here.
Right. You talked about the impact on governmental leaders, but the campaign of incitement and perhaps the failure to better counter that is also having impact internationally. We see a growing number of anti-Semitic incidents around the world, even in places, for example, like the U.S., never mind in areas like Greece. A lot of them seem to be directed specifically or increasingly against Israelis who have served in the IDF. There was this incident just in St. Louis in the U.S. where a family home was vandalized and car was vandalized by an American citizen who had served in the IDF. Maybe talk about that impact because, again, the AJC, that is certainly an issue that they've been out in front of for many years now.
First of all, you were talking in a very timely manner because 2 days ago, the FBI published a report of the hate crimes of 2024. And although the Jewish population in the U.S. makes barely 2% of the total population, 70% of the hate crimes, or in our language, anti-Semitism crimes, were for the Jewish population, which is an astonishing figure. Now, we have been monitoring the anti-Semitism mechanism all over the U.S. in the last decades. And today there's a situation in which young Jews are considering whether to go and actually participate in public events or not, or stay at home because it's safer at home. Now, there are three factors we need to take into consideration. The first one is legislation. You need to legislate, to give the power to the legislators to enforce this anti-Semitism issue. So IRA is a definition of anti-Semitism worldwide. So we encourage as many countries in the world and states in the US to recognize the definition. Otherwise, how would you know what is anti-Semitism exactly? Number two, to educate. Now, educate is not only schools. It can be in a law firm. It can be in an airline, because sometimes these comments are not, people are not aware they're saying anti-Semite comments. And of course, social media companies and so on. And the third part is law enforcement. At the end of the day, if someone committed anti-Semite attack or violence of some sort, they need to be punished for it. Otherwise, there will be a continuation and a follow-up on that person's steps. So these three criteria are critical to somehow take care of anti-Semitism. We're trying to help in that and to work on that all across the U.S.
Right. Now, Avital, next week, Israel is going to mark 20 years of the beginning of the carrying out of what is called the disengagement from Gaza, the withdrawal of the 21 Israeli communities there, some 9,000 Israelis that were living in Gaza. You served at the time. We met. That's where I met you at the time, when you were down in Gaza serving as the IDF spokesperson for the international media. Maybe just a look back at that time. A lot of people are going to be looking back and at its relation then and where we are now, and especially, I think, a theme of sort of missed opportunities, most of all for the Palestinians, for Israel certainly, and maybe even also for the international community in the Arab world as well.
I'll never forget that the Israelis who lived in Gaza until 2005 actually dealt with agriculture. And they had greenhouses for flowers and strawberries and tomatoes. And the Israelis left those greenhouses behind, as they were, hoping that the people of Gaza would make good use of it. Unfortunately, in less than a year, those greenhouses turned as covers for underground tunnels. And of course, they were not used for agriculture. So unfortunately, the people in Gaza chose Hamas, as you know, in 2007. I hope they are sorry for that choice today. I hope they understand they made the wrong choice that actually worsened their life conditions and their human rights and is not with accordance to their values. Ariel Sharon at the time took a very brave political decision.
The then Prime Minister
took a very brave decision. He was in a minority. It wasn't a popular decision in the Israeli public, but yet he went for it. I remember there were many bloody days when the Israelis lived in Gaza. There were terror attacks and there were grenades hurled and a lot of lives were lost.
Right, the people living there, yes.
Exactly. So there were two sides to this coin, whether to stay there and continue paying in people's lives or retreat and go somewhere else, build a better life. Now, we have all these communities who have evacuated after October 7th from the envelope of Gaza. And we need at least to make sure that they're able to return safely to their homes. And that's where I'm connecting between 2005 and today. We need to supply some decent level of defense, of protection to these people in the envelope of Gaza, those 100,000 people who live there. We didn't have it back then in 2005 with the Israelis who were there, but we need it today more than ever.
I just, as a final word, thinking back to that time, and to where we are now, where you are now, I mean, what did you think at the time about what the future might bring? And looking back at that, again, as I said, perhaps, unfortunately, like I said, a missed opportunity. also for the world itself?
Yeah, look, I mean, 3 years ago, I was advocating positively for 18,000 Palestinian workers that came from Gaza to work daily in Israel.
Right.
And I saw the economic conditions shifted. There are beautiful malls in Gaza and high-level restaurants and libraries and beautiful roads and beaches and factories and stores and luxury department stores and so on. And here we are, because they took the wrong choice. But I'm still very sad of the fact that I didn't find one person in Gaza who would stand up in front of the camera and say, this does not represent Muslim values. What happened on October 7th, the burning, the raping, the molesting does not represent Islamic value. However, I will finish on a positive note. I believe there can be a change. It will take to educate a generation to two generations, but it could happen. And in our part of the world, you know, we have to remain optimists.
All right, God willing. Avital Leibovich, thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief. And now a final word. Last week, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar tweeted a statement in which he condemned, quote, the Russian strikes against residential neighborhoods in Kyiv, which resulted in an immense and tragic loss of life. And he called for a durable peace that ensures the security of Ukraine. This was one of the most direct statements of support for Ukraine and criticism of Russia made by a top Israeli official since the start of the war. And it follows last month's trip to Ukraine by Sa'ar, the most senior visit by an Israeli official there in 2.5 years. Now, during that visit, the countries announced the start of a joint strategic dialogue to counter a common danger, the use of Iranian drones to attack both nations. These events indicate a shifting of Israel's stance to the Russia-Ukraine war. Since the start of that conflict, Israel has maintained a somewhat neutral approach, expressing sympathy for Ukraine, but not taking any concrete steps, such as providing it with military aid that could potentially antagonize Russia. Now, the primary motivation for this was not to endanger Israel's ability to operate in Syrian airspace and risk the fire of Moscow's forces there that propped up the Assad regime, along with a secondary concern over the fate of the Jewish community in Russia. But circumstances have changed in recent months. The overthrow of Bashar Assad has resulted in the withdrawal of Russian forces from Syria, removing it as a factor for Israeli concern on that front. Also, the June war with Iran highlighted that common threat of Iranian-produced weapons that threatens both Israel and Ukraine, as well as the tightening of ties between Tehran and Moscow, further distancing Israel from Russia. And there's another factor as well. In recent weeks, U.S. President Trump has finally taken a tougher line against Russia for its refusal to negotiate in good faith on Ukraine, threatening new sanctions on Putin's regime and resuming American military aid to Kyiv. This has presumably given Israel more latitude and also shifting somewhat its tone toward Russia while staying in sync with the policies of its closest, most indispensable ally, the U.S. While all of this is for the good, the time is well past due for Israel to provide greater open support for Ukraine, including military aid. This step is well justified in the face of Russia's continued backing for the Iranian regime, the warm welcome it has given to Hamas leaders visiting Moscow in recent years, and Vladimir Putin's increasingly aggressive posture towards any efforts for a just and lasting peace in the Ukraine conflict. Beyond that, there are benefits to be had by Israel tightening ties with Ukraine, not least of which is the military knowledge to be gleaned from that country's battle against Iranian UAV technology and its own growing expertise in drone warfare pitted against Russia's numerically superior ground forces. And above all, this is a moral obligation. Israel and Ukraine are both pitted against merciless enemies who view civilian casualties not as collateral damage, but as a primary strategic aim, and who seek not just victories on the battlefield, but a desire to see both countries literally wiped off the map. While visiting Kyiv and holding talks with President Zelensky, Foreign Minister Sa'ar also met with Ukrainian soldier Artem Borek, who lost 5 family members, his daughter, his wife, his mother-in-law, and 2 cousins in an Iranian missile attack. But that was not in Ukraine. It was in the Israeli city of Bat Yam in June, where the family was staying while Borek's daughter was undergoing cancer treatment here. Sa'ar told Borek that Israel shared his pain, but that is not enough. It is time for Israel to also share with Ukraine the military aid that Borek and his comrades need to fight off a Russian invasion being fueled in part by Israel's worst enemy, in a fight that may be taking place thousands of miles from here, but is still on a vital common battlefield against an axis of terror that threatens all free nations. Thank you for joining us on ILTV Security.